excited to have you at the MIT Migration Summit today. My name is Lorraine Charles, and I'm the Executive Director of NAML. Today, we'll be hearing from Nadia and her colleague, Regeza. The MIT, sorry, I'm messing up today. The MIT the Migration Summit 2023, organized by the MIT Refugee Action Hub, NAML, Karam Foundation, is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, social enterprises, policymakers, employers, and governments around key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme of co-creating pathways to learning, livelihoods, and dignity through virtual events hosted by participating partners all over the world. Today, I'm really excited to welcome my good friend, Nadia, who will be presenting this today. This is Nadia's second time at the Migration Summit, so we're really happy to have her. Nadia is a refugee livelihoods advocate with over 7 years experience in higher education. And right now she's calling in from Malawi. Nadia, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Lorraine. So let me do a quick introduction kind of before we even jump into the subject. So as Lorraine mentioned, my name is Nadia, and I've worked in the refugee higher ed space for the last 7 or 8 years. And I'm actually presenting today on my dissertation subject, which is around refugee repatriation and higher education. And I am thrilled to be joined by a former student turned colleague turned partner, Regeza. So Regeza, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself before I get into the agenda?
Thank you so much, Nadia. As you said, my name is Regeza. I'm currently in DRC. I was a refugee in Malawi, and excited to meet everyone here, and I would love to share my stories with you guys. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, as Regeza mentioned, disclaimer before we even begin, I am calling in from the warm heart of Africa, and Regeza is calling in from DRC. So you have to take a moment and say a prayer to the internet gods that we both stay connected, because it's nice weather right now, but one drop of rain and you will lose us both. But it also is an amazing group of participants in the room. So if you lose us both, I have no fear that you will have a fantastic conversation without us. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here today with Regeza to talk about a subject that has been on my mind and been bothering me ever since I started working in this space of refugee higher ed. And that is exploring the link between higher education and a refugee's return home. And I was lucky enough actually to study this subject as my dissertation topic over the last year, and actually interviewed Regeza as one of the case studies for the paper. So what I'll do is kind of frame things up with a little background on repatriation, and then pass it over to Regeza to share his personal story of his return home to DRC. And then wrap us up with an overview of the broader findings of their research. And we would really love for this session to be as engaging as possible. So feel free to throw in questions or comments in the chat box. And then also a heads up that at the end of the session, we will be passing the mic over to the audience to talk about your policy or practical recommendations for things that you think that we could do with the information that we're presenting today. So let me dive right in with a little overview of durable solutions for refugees. So right now, if you've been attending any of the summit sessions, you've probably heard the statistic. There are over 32 million refugees around the world right now. And there are 3 durable solutions. So a durable solution is basically a permanent resolution to your refugee status, meaning a solution that allows someone to no longer qualify as a refugee according to the 1951 convention. And so these 3 durable solutions are on the board. Number 1 is local integration into a host country. Number 2 is resettlement to a third country. And number 3, and the subject that we're going to be talking about today, is voluntary repatriation back to your home country. And according to UNHCR, repatriation is considered the durable solution of choice for the largest number of refugees. And that is for a variety of factors. to give some data or some stats behind durable solutions. Number one and number two, very few refugees have access to those opportunities. So local integration means basically gaining the citizenship of the country in which you are a refugee. And they have really bad statistics on this, but it's something like less than 5% of people with refugee status have the opportunity to gain citizenship where they are. So in Malawi, for example, where Regeza was a refugee, they do not have a policy at all for any kind of local integration, meaning that even by birth or by marriage, a refugee is not allowed to become a Malawian citizen. And then the second one, resettlement to a third country. So for example, again, the Camp Zaleka in Malawi, there are resettlement programs to the United States, to Norway, Canada, Australia, and it's just less than 1% of refugees who have that opportunity to get resettled. So, you know, by those stats, you can understand why repatriation is such an important subject, because it is not just the most desired solution. It is also probably the one that's most practical for the largest number of refugees. So when we talk about repatriation, there are two types of repatriation. The first is assisted, and the second is unassisted. So assisted repatriation is when UNHCR or other NGOs or governments assist a refugee to return home once they determine that a country is safe. So this assistance can be in the form of transportation, shelter, donations, and legal support, both in the country where you are a refugee, and then also in your home country once you get there. And at the moment, UNHCR primarily focuses on large-scale facilitated repatriation programs to conflict-free countries. So this excludes, for example, Regeza's home country of DRC and the home country of the other participants in the research who are from South Sudan. So what we're specifically talking about today is voluntary unassisted repatriation to conflict countries and how higher education has contributed to these individuals' ability to do that. And the last thing I will touch on to frame things up for Regeza's story is just to talk about reintegration. We really can't talk about repatriation without talking about reintegration, because a refugee's ability to stay home successfully is really based on their ability to reintegrate. So that is their ability to find a job, earn an income, make friends, lay down roots, things like that. And it's really in these opportunities for reintegration that we see the real impact of a university degree. So Regeza, with that, I hand it over to you to tell your return journey home.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I am Congolese by national and spent 5.5 years in Malawi. Yeah, I'm excited because I'm no longer a refugee, so I consider myself, I'm Congolese. I have now Congolese credentials, and I would love you guys to give me your time and share a bit of my journey home. And to start with, because coming from a country with severe conflicts, and especially Goma, where I was in 2016, it was difficult for me to stay there and arrived in Malawi. Fortunately enough, because Malawi is a peaceful country and a country where there are opportunities for refugees, and these opportunities are like scholarships for refugees. And as a college degree dropout due to conflict in DRC, I grabbed that chance in the camp and took the opportunity to go into the degree programs offered by Jesuit Worldwide Learning and also Jesuit Refugee Service. So because I always wanted to come back home with the skills that I've learned, and then was always fortunate when I got into this program. I learned courses like political thought, like leadership, management, and also being in Malawi where there is peace. I thought it was really good for me one day to go back home and replicate the skills, replicate the qualities of leadership in Malawi and take it to Congo. Because being a refugee is because of problems in the country, poor leadership. And then as the government failed us in DRC, I always thought learning skills and knowledge, bringing them back to the country, and then supporting the communities where I work in. But we cannot talk about repatriation without talking about two factors that play a very big role. Like the first factor is the push factor, and then the other factor is the pull factor. So as a refugee, the push factor is a factor that pushes someone out of the host country. And then the pull factor is that factor that pulls you back into your own country. And for my example, in Malawi, the push factor was a challenge to have a job, even though you have the skills from the scholarship providing boards. And then the pull factor for me to go back in Congo was first having the skills, the knowledge, and then a job offer. So during my time as a refugee and also student in the refugee provided programs, I also got a chance to enroll into the African Drone Data Academy, which teaches drones, how to pilot drones and how to make drones work for humanitarian purposes. Then I grabbed that opportunity from UNICEF through Jesuit Worldwide Learning. And then when I completed the certificate, I got the certificate, I thought it was difficult for me to work in Malawi because of the restrictions for like work restriction for refugees. And that really coupled with my experience or my knowledge from the degree programs in leadership, I thought I was wasting my time staying in Malawi by that time. And then started thinking of coming back to home, coming back to DRC. And one biggest point to me was that with my networking, I was called by the African Drone and Data Academy managers who offered me a job in DRC. And this job was to work in the drone industry, piloting drones. So it was not easy for me to take that risk because coming from Congo, where it's that UNHCR doesn't provide assisted repatriation programs for countries with conflict still, like my country, as Nadia just mentioned. It was really a challenge, and I started thinking of the pull factors. If now I have the skills from the degree programs, I have the drone certificate, but it's not useful in Malawi because I'm not allowed to work. Then my country is having several problems. Yes, it is in conflict, but there are other places where there is no conflict. Then I started thinking, coming back to my country, and met several people, like discussing about how exactly I can get my way through like Congo again back, not having all paperwork. Like it was very, very difficult, but I was fortunate enough because I had to contact different people from borders, and then in Tanzania and Malawi borders, and then even back in country, and how exactly I could make my way through, because it was difficult for, like financially it was difficult, and also logistically it was very challenging for me. But I really took that risk, not only because I have the skills and knowledge, but because there is already an offered job, which is already there, and started looking, weighing, what if I stay in Malawi, and what if I go back and do the work, and then provide, improve also the living conditions with people in remote areas. So that the work I do exactly is really a cool work where you just sit in your own office, you fly a drone into cities, and then to go into very remote area where you meet like these people who don't really have access to healthcare. And then that was really like exciting to me to keep doing that particular job, because working in a place like being in Malawi, where my people suffer in Congo, they don't have vaccines, it's difficult to transport pathology sample. And then I thought it was good for me to take that risk. So then maybe the most important part for this is in 2020, I got this opportunity to return, to go back in Malawi, to do my recurrent trainings as a pilot. And I went because I already had my passport, Congolese passport. I traveled to Malawi, not as a refugee, but as a Congolese citizen. And I went everywhere. I even met my friends from the refugee camps. I also met my good friends I met for the Malawian community and tried to share my experience with them and came back with the same knowledge on drones. And I can say that that is really, really something that really pushed me to like take that opportunity and do something. And now coming back in my country, being able to move back and forth, even go visit again Malawi. And that's really helping my community. And I can maybe share with you guys, good news is I was also again promoted as a business development manager for Super in DRC. This is exciting for me as a former refugee now doing something for your country. And then also having the skills in leadership, trying to replicate, copy some of the good things I saw in the government in Malawi, and maybe one day, because I love politics, maybe one day to influence policies in our country and make sure that everybody, like there is no more conflict and people no go again, like run away from their country due to conflict or any other problems. So it was really, for me, a very long journey to take, but I took that risk because I had the skills, had the knowledge, the networking I made from the scholarship providers. And then back in the country, I kept talking to people and also like interpersonal communication skills we learned from the programs we took in the refugee camp. So I could never imagine if staying in a refugee camp without going into any of the programs, like the degree programs, even the drone academy program, if I could have returned back home, maybe probably wouldn't be possible. And then I would also go back home just with the skills and the knowledge. I needed like an offer, a job, so that I take the risk, not going into the area where I come from, like the Kivu, where it's conflict everywhere, every time, then went into Equateur, which is in a very big forest, equatorial forest. And there is really accessibility is difficult. There are no roads, communicating is different. They speak Lingala here. Where I come from, I speak Swahili, but I had to navigate through all of that because I lived in a multicultural environment in a refugee camp. And also I had the skills and courses that I took, like interpersonal communication, entrepreneurship. So, and then currently I'm doing also some entrepreneurship work, like in Congo, like investing in agribusiness. So I think this is something I thought was really good for me to share with you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Regeza. Yeah, I mean, every time Regeza speaks, I think of something new and important about what he's saying, but he's really talking about rebuilding his country. And for those of us that work in the space of refugee higher ed, we're often talking about how like these programs are for that purpose, so that you're producing this generation of young people that can go and rebuild their countries. But there's no how and when, right? So at the moment, all of the university programs for refugees, like we're seeing this trend of refugees going back home, but they're kind of accidental results of the university programs. And I think that we should concentrate more on this impact because it's an important one. And it is in fact people like Regeza that are going to rebuild their countries. So as I mentioned earlier, Regeza was actually one of the participants in my dissertation research. And basically I conducted interviews with 6 individuals with similar backgrounds. So individuals who had accessed higher education and then made the decision to repatriate. And I analyzed the research by transcribing the interviews and then pulling out the themes that were common among the 6 participants. And from those, from that analysis, I really found 5 major themes that linked their repatriation to higher education. And also, I will just say that before Regeza and I got on, we did a little practice, and he told me that if I drone on too long, people are going to fall asleep. So I will try to be really brief with my findings so that we can get to the questions and recommendations, which is obviously the more exciting part of all of this. I will also say before I present the findings, I should add a disclaimer that, of course, there are hundreds of factors that go into someone's decision to return home, and higher education is simply one of those many factors. And now that I've put that academic disclaimer out there, I'll take my researcher hat off and say that as a practitioner, I feel like there's an undeniable correlation. Like, we are constantly seeing refugee students in university programs disproportionately returning home, and not just returning home, but returning home successfully. And I really do believe that this is something that UNHCR needs to be paying attention to. So let me summarize my findings quickly. They are on the screen, but basically 5 themes: desire, confidence, aspiration, capacity, and qualifications. So the first one is a desire to contribute to their country of origin. So among all 6 of the participants, this was a really strong theme that came out. They all talked about completing their degree and feeling like they had almost a duty to rebuild their home countries because of the skills that they now possess. And it was interesting because some participants talked about this motivation to give back coming from the skills that they felt that they had gained in the programs. But then for others, it really came from like a Jesuit ideology, actually. So all 6 of the participants were part of a scholarship from either Jesuit Refugee Service or Jesuit Worldwide Learning. I don't know if there are JRS or JWL folks in the audience, but shout out to you because you've made a great impact. And a theme in the Jesuit tradition, or a slogan, I will say, is being a man for others. So several of the participants talked about having gone through their scholarship with the Jesuits and feeling like they had a duty to give back and be a man for others. So it really seemed like gaining the hard skills in the degree coupled with the soft skills of a duty to serve were really a high motivation for wanting to return home. The second theme was confidence to return unassisted. So as you can imagine, the idea of returning to a country from which you once fled is already very daunting. And then imagine the added stress of having to do that completely unassisted. So a common theme among the participants was the sense of confidence that they could actually manage the journey home and they could be successful once they were home. So Regeza touched on this a little bit, but in the interview, he talked extensively about feeling like he had gone through an international university program, met people from all kinds of backgrounds and cultures, and felt like that had prepared him with the diplomacy skills to make that border crossing, or in his case, multiple border crossings. And that seems like an easy statement, but if you have no paperwork, that is really, really tricky every time you cross a border. So all of the students kind of discussed this confidence in their ability to navigate those tricky interpersonal and legal situations. The third is aspiration to earn money. This is an obvious one. You know, when you get a degree, you expect to get a better job and earn more money. And that is how it is supposed to be. But that is not how it went for all of the research participants, because they were based in Malawi and Kenya, two countries that withhold refugees' rights to work. So all of the participants, before they earned their degree, were basically working as volunteers in the camps, making minimum wage or less. And then they spent 4 years in this university program, and then we're still making the volunteer stipend. So as you can imagine, that was incredibly frustrating for everyone, and both a push and a pull factor. And yeah, just as a happy side note, all 6 of the participants reported that they are now earning between 6 and 12 times as much money as they were earning as refugees. The 4th finding is about capacity to leverage networks, and Regeza's story actually inspired this theme because all of the interview participants talked about leveraging networks before they left the country in order to make sure that they had opportunities when they got home, and then also leveraging networks from their university programs to help them integrate once they were home. And this is really important because, again, everyone has networks from all over, but I don't think that it was coincidental that all of the networks that they were telling me about in terms of getting a job came directly from their university family. So for example, one of the interview participants, he got set up, he was working as an intern for JRS in Nairobi, and then his boss at JRS Nairobi introduced him to JRS in Juba in South Sudan, so helped him get his first internship that he was going to do when he got back home. In another case, another South Sudanese student in Nairobi was part of the student association, and at the student association met someone from the government in South Sudan who helped link him with his now job with the tax authority in Juba. So yeah, and then Regeza's story, obviously, he was introduced by the drone company from his scholarship body, and that drone academy then introduced him to his first job. So these networks were really important in helping them get that first job. The other thing too, in terms of reintegration, is that these networks are also really helpful in helping them feel at home. So all of the Southern New Hampshire University graduates from Kakuma camp that have now returned to South Sudan have a WhatsApp group, and they occasionally meet up in Juba. And I know that this might sound like a small thing, but when you've been away from your country for a very long time and you have a small group of people that you can relate to in your city, you're more likely to succeed, right? And stay as a returnee and never again enter that cycle of becoming a refugee. And then the 5th and final thematic area that I found is, I guess, the most obvious one, but it is that higher education allows you to get jobs. And I will make the sweeping statement that you can't repatriate without the promise of a job. So I think one aspect of repatriation that those of us without lived refugee experiences fail to realize is the impossible challenge of returning to a country where you likely have no money or assets remaining. So almost all of the participants said that their number one factor that they needed in place before deciding to repatriate was either the promise of a job or a very high likelihood of a job. So all of the participants, made sure that they were going to be employed within the first few months that they returned home. And all of the participants are now currently working in jobs where a degree was the minimum qualification. Okay, Regeza, I feel like I didn't go too long to bore people. Those are my 5 key findings. And I hope that while Regeza and I were presenting, that you were busy brainstorming like what could possibly be done with this information that now we've gathered and presented. So I do want to take us to recommendations, but perhaps I will pause us and maybe take some questions from the audience and then do our recommendation section.
Yes, Nadia, I think as I'm using my phone, like messages coming in the chat,
oh yeah,
you can help.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, great. So I see one question about the research from Selena. So the question is, could you give former educational background and gender breakdown of their interviewees? Yes, I can. And if you are in academics or research, you're going to be disappointed by my answer because it was 5 men and 1 woman, 5 people from South Sudan and 1 Regeza from DRC. And their educational backgrounds before they became refugees were mixed. A couple of them had accessed some form of higher education before becoming a refugee, but like Regeza started his degree in Goma. But the vast majority of them actually completed both their primary and secondary education in camps. I hope that answers your question. Lorraine, I think I see your hand up.
Yes, this is really interesting research, and I'm sort of linking this to the work that I do with remote work, and I wonder how this could be another factor to help repatriation. If a refugee is working remotely in a camp, wherever he is, and he or she can take that remote job wherever they go, could that be another factor that can support repatriation?
I would assume so. Regeza, what do you think?
Probably yes, because I think when someone is working remotely and then he knows that the work that he has can allow him to organize financially, because that's the main point. Because financially, if you're getting $500 US, for example, and you want to repatriate to Congo, I would say yes, because I know the cost of living in Congo, maybe a month can be less than $200, and then you can keep $300, then that's enough for you to stay, to repatriate and start working from home. But if, as a refugee, someone is working and earning stipend, like $100, I've seen some employments online where someone gets less than $200. It's difficult for you to repatriate because there are fluctuations in the condition of living.
Yeah, and I will also add, and I don't know if any of the participants on the call are in South Sudan right now, but my understanding from these interviews is that the internet, even in Juba, is still quite problematic, so much so that it would be difficult to hold an online job. And then also, this is an assumption, but I think in certain areas, it's quite difficult still to send money. So I don't know exactly the cases for Congo and South Sudan, but I think that it would be probably even more of a challenge than to send money and to access internet than in the host countries. Great. Okay, these are such good questions coming in. And I'm trying to read them. Charlie, first of all, I haven't even read your question, but there's no such thing as a stupid question. But he says, but have you found that having completed a higher education degree impacts the prospects of people repatriating without facing similar threats that led them leaving in the first place? This is probably a hard question to generalize about, so apologies if it's not pertinent. It is super pertinent. I will talk a little bit about the experiences of the 6, and then Regeza, you obviously have a very relevant answer to this question. As we mentioned, DRC and South Sudan are still in conflict. And the reason that among the 6 they were able to return is that they were all returning to cities that they had not originally fled from. So a lot of the participants that I interviewed, the South Sudanese participants, they could still not return to their home cities, but they were working in the capital in Juba. And Regeza, do you want to go ahead and explain your calculations behind where you return to?
Yes. So for me, whoever knows Congo a bit, I am from the south, the east of Congo. That we have South Kivu and North Kivu. It's too close to Rwanda and Burundi, but where my job is based is in Equateur province. It's way far. So it's on the north. Then when you see the distance, even if there is conflict the other side, it's probably might not come my way, but still more we have the area might still play a role, because in Congo we have even in Equateur we have some gangs, So maybe they don't know you. They might also harm you for some other reasons, but not the reasons like the one we faced in Goma. And that's why I was like, I can take this risk because it's a risk taking. Then I can take the risk because I could also be like very far and earn a living. And the other thing, there was still, for my employer, there was still a possibility as a drone pilot, for example, you can still work remotely. Like I can pilot even from Australia and pilot a drone here because it's a biblos work. So I still believe that someone can also take, if you are given an opportunity, flexibility from your employer, then it's possible for you to change your area. I don't know if that answered the question.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
So there's a question from Virginia. Is resettlement different, less conflict prone? Is resettlement different and less conflict prone part of the country another determining factor? I think you mean, Virginia, that if you're going to a place, a part of the country that has less conflict, is that easier for you to repatriate? Is that what you mean, Virginia?
Virginia is my mom. Mom, you're throwing out a really tough question. You're gonna have to clarify. Oh, she just messaged me directly saying that we just answered it in the last one.
Okay. Virginia, I want to see you.
Yeah, there's 40 participants. I'm pretty sure half of them are Asmal, Palmer, Kelp. So thank you, family, for coming to support. Great. Are there any other questions that I missed, Lorraine? Okay, super. So now I want us to talk about recommendations, and I really want to hear from the audience. So now I know that my research is small, but I also know that if you're a practitioner in this space, you know that there is truth behind it. So if we can get more quantitative research around this and really prove that there's a connection between higher education and repatriation, what can we do? Like, what is the way forward? Who needs to know about this? What are some policy changes that could happen either at the UNHCR level, at the university scholarship level? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, and please just be brave and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate for giving such an amazing presentation. I learned so much. So a few points that I consider like being a refugee who living in Turkey for the past 7 years. I have faced a significant amount of issues with the visa application. For instance, from my own experience, I got the scholarship, full scholarship for my university. I got accepted to university in Philadelphia, Thomas Jefferson University, and university. Like there was no problem between in my application. So they still rejected my visa because I'm being a refugee, and they were not sure that I would be returning to my homeland after my education. So I was wondering, like, if there's any work that or there's any policy that emphasize on this point, because there's a significant amount of refugees who are living in Turkey, and they're also facing the same issue. They have the concern if they pass all of the procedures, and but they don't know about their future. Would they get the visa or not? I'm not sure if I missed this point or not. What would be your recommendation, or is there any policies that could emphasize on this topic that give refugees a chance to go forward and continue education, and some issues being a refugee, like just because of one reason they reject your visa, which is not a good point. So I hope I was able to tell my question, and looking forward to receive your response.
Yeah, great. Actually, Lorraine, do you want to take that one? I saw that you responded in the chat too.
I mean, so I know in the UK, there's sort of schemes, like, for example, MasterCard Foundation has scholarships for Edinburgh, Oxford and Cambridge, where refugee students, they get scholarships here, and then they've got an arrangement that supports the visa application. But they get the visa with the knowledge, expectation that they can't return home. And I think Australia also does the same, and US. I think it's just a matter of connecting with the right organizations to support that, to support the application.
I appreciate your response. Like, would you send me the link if it's possible? I can contact those organizations.
Maybe connect with me after.
Okay, sure. Perfect. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Hi.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Nadia, for the excellent presentation. And I'm so glad that you asked Regeza to join you in that, because this is something that's very important in refugee-based research, where refugees are also involved as co-researchers and not just as participants. So that's great. One thing that I wanted to, so I'm from Pakistan, and I also conducted a participatory research study with Afghan refugees in Pakistan, because there is around like more than 1.4 million Afghan refugees who are living in Pakistan currently. So one of the major problems that Afghan refugees face after receiving their higher education from Pakistan and when they go back to Afghanistan as repatriates, they face a lot of issues with regards to finding jobs, where the government institutions or even the private firms now focusing more or giving employment to those people who have either taken higher education from Afghanistan or have graduated from madrasas in Pakistan. So there is a bias among the employees as well in the country of origin, which results in hopelessness among the new young repatriates who really want to go back to home to rebuild their lives and to rebuild their communities. So how to really, and is there any like sort of help for those repatriates, how they could really advocate for their rights, how they could really channel all their energy towards rebuilding their country while they're facing so much of issues with regards to reintegration into their homes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And in their research, discrimination against returnees came up very often. It's interesting though, because in my conversations with these 6, it was not about their higher education. It was just about their returnee status in general. But what you're describing is actually discrimination based on their returnee status and where they got their degree from. So I don't have experience with what you're talking about, but I'm curious if they could maybe apply for an equivalency. I know that in some countries, when you get an equivalency, it doesn't even necessarily show where your original degree was from. But no, it's super tough. And in the case of the 6 participants, they actually just hid their returnee identity. All of them described that. So, and Regeza too also talked about, feeling almost like a foreigner in the area that he is now. And a lot of the participants who had spent, a decade or more outside of their home country felt too like it was very difficult to pretend like they had never left, but it was something that they had to do if they wanted to get basic services from government or employers.
I've got another question from Wasamba. I'd like to know if the link is more correlation than a causality.
Great. All the hardest questions are coming from family or former students. So thank you for that one, Freddie. I don't know, honestly. I think my prediction is that it's causality. I don't think that you would see Freddie, like there's just a disproportionate number of university students that are going back. And I would have to do quantitative data to really answer that question. But yeah, I pass the baton if anyone else wants to take on the quantitative data. I do think that you would find that one causes the other.
Okay, there's another question. Do you think that a broader, more robust, larger number and type study that you conducted of the type can move the needle on third country resettlement, i.e. demonstrating the success of these repatriations as an avenue toward other countries opening up and allowing more refugees in? Nice question. That's from John.
Yeah, I don't know. So sorry, the question is demonstrating the success of these repatriations as an avenue toward other countries opening up and allowing more refugees in. Yeah, I mean, maybe, but I don't know, Regeza, imagine, what do you think if the Malawian government knew that, you know, that, I guess the question is basically like, if, for example, the Malawian government knew that a refugee could theoretically access higher education in the camp and then return home, do you think that the Malawian government would be more willing to accept refugees or be more welcoming?
I guess it's a guess, probably because, why am I guessing? Because I had to interact with a few Malawian officials. So I think most of the things Malawian authorities or people in Malawi think is, when we have more refugees and they got more scholarships and they study, they have more chance to earn a living than the Malawians, their hosts. So this is one thing. And then if they know, giving them scholarships, giving them a chance to study, then they will go back home. They would probably be willing to support more refugees. But like you can remember, Nadia, when we were in Malawi, for us to start with getting work permits was difficult because it's a law. It has to be discussed with the parliament and then adopted. It's difficult. People were blocking that. Why? Because if we have more refugees getting scholarships from US universities, they have the credentials, then probably Malawians do not have the same qualifications. When it's a job search within Malawi, then we might be, like, the proportion of getting refugees might be higher than what they expect. I guess that would be my answer.
And I think we've covered a lot of the questions. I wanted to just take an opportunity to share. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. Sorry for that. Yeah, I'm Humre Pacific from Nairobi. Yeah, it's very true that repatriation is linked to higher education. And I really appreciate my colleague from DRC for the journey. But I have some simple questions. I don't know whether you can assist me to answer that one. So when we realize in DRC, specifically in North Kivu, we have the issue of insecurity. In fact, you are willing to go back in DRC, but the issue is security, specifically in southern part of Kivu. Then when you realize that you want to go to DRC and start thinking again to integrate in other communities, because your community that you have you are coming from is highly affected with the war. It's very, very hard. Yeah. Again, most of us have been refugees since we were young. So in DRC, people are speaking French. So it becomes very hard again to integrate into the job market. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, Regeza, that's all yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Ned. Probably let me say something. Currently, most international organizations, humanitarian organizations where I work, they love, like in Kinshasa nowadays, they love people who speak in English. Yeah, you can speak a bit of French. I would maybe recommend, as you speak now English, try learning some short French. Like, let me tell you one thing. We've just hired a Malawian pilot. This is just for the case of pilot, just because he could speak some French. He speaks English, yes, but I needed someone who could speak some French, because whenever I'm unavailable, he will support me. And I know organizations, humanitarian ones, they hire people who speak English and who can barely speak some French. So for you, my recommendation, learn a bit of French, then you are good.
Thanks, Pacific. Okay, I'm aware that we're running out of time, so I wanted to just share the recommendations that I put in the paper and see what you guys think of them. So the obvious recommendation is fund more higher ed programs. It's not a luxury. I do think that higher education should be a basic human right. But I tried to make more specific recommendations in the research. So one was to support or a call for UNHCR to support small scale assistance and part-time returnees. So, in all of these cases, the individuals had to expend their own money and really go through quite a dangerous journey home because there wasn't assistance available to them. And, the research shows that returns to conflict areas are going to happen whether or not there's assistance. So my request or my recommendation was for UNHCR to find a way to support these small scale returns. And then my second was modifications to existing higher education opportunities. So one theme that continued to come up in the research was that the participants wanted to continue further education. So whether that is that they finished their associate's degree and wanted to complete their degree, or they did their bachelor's degree and wanted to do their master's, but that there were no opportunities in the areas of their home countries to do so. So the recommendation was to see if organizations or universities that currently provide scholarships to refugees could help support returnees as well. So whether that looks like continued online support for someone like Regeza in a remote part of Congo, or if that's a satellite university office in Juba that folks could access. A lot of the participants had started their next level of higher education and ended up dropping out after they returned because of some of these issues. So one of the recommendations was to tweak that and allow returnees to continue learning after they've returned. And then the last, which I didn't get to talk about much in this presentation, but I think is really worth investigating, is having university programs and scholarship programs make a concentrated effort to allow their students to return. So one example is that a young man who was based in the camp in Kenya applied for grant funding with Jesuit Worldwide Learning to do his university mandated internship back in South Sudan. So he had basically found an internship in Juba and requested to do his internship in Juba. And I was working with the partner at the time, and we all kind of like wrung our hands about it and like, can we support this? And is it a liability? And anyway, we ended up agreeing to the grant proposal and funding his internship back in Juba. And he did the 3-month internship, got offered a job, has been in Juba now for 3 years and moved his entire family of 5 back. So, that's such a one-off story. And I think that if there can be kind of an organized way to assist students to do internships or to have opportunities to go home and try to find employment, I think that would be worth everyone's time, money, and effort. So we are almost at the end of our hour. So I just wanted to extend a really sincere thank you to Regeza for taking a lot of time in the research to do this with me, and then also to co-present today. It's been really fun. And then to Lorraine for organizing this incredible event last year, this year. I just continue to be impressed by all of the presenters and also just how organized you guys have been in all of this. So really sincere thanks to the summit for giving us this platform.
Nadia, thank you so much. This is such a fascinating discussion, and I'm going to send this to UNHCR because really this is something that the whole DAFI and all the scholarship movement, this is not a discussion that I've heard about in all my meetings and all the conversations I've had with them. So I'm going to connect you to this space because this is something that I think hasn't really been thought about, but really is something that can be deliberately presented as an argument for supporting a greater access to higher education for refugees. We have one last question, Espino. I don't know if you want to unmute and sort of say your comment, Espino, because it's quite interesting.
This is the square. I'm in Malawi, but I'm from DRC. I know it was just a comment that I know Nadia wanted. I think she mentioned something about what they would do next. So I was saying that if NGOs and businesses would know about these findings, I think it would be beneficial because we have a lot of potential within refugee camps. And yeah, Regeza is a good friend of mine. And I think when he was preparing his journey, yeah, the first thing we really sat down to think about was, the offer, like what's on the table. We need to know that first before we can take the risk. So yeah, I think if we have more opportunities to people like Regeza, people like me, yeah, we would be willing to go back and make change within our countries.
Yeah, thank you. And go ahead, Nadia.
I was also just going to say that the other thing that we didn't get to talk about, and I would love for someone else to research, is the kind of pull or ripple effect that people like Regeza have. I've talked to so many community members from Congo who are still in the camp in Malawi and really look at Regeza as an inspiration to return. And he's kind of paved the way. And I think same thing in South Sudan with those participants. One of them went first and then kind of taught the others how to do it. So I think, yes, one person is repatriating, but I think there is a ripple impact for years to come.
Yeah, and I mean, this is quite fascinating, and definitely something that someone should do research now. This is your next project. And yeah, and same for employment. I mean, if someone works in the camp, not for a stipend, they have money with which to move. So this is why I really promote remote work. By working in the camp, you gain money, and then the thought of you leave, moving on is okay because you've money in your pockets and you have experience. So much easier to find work when you go back home. So thank you. We have some amazing sessions coming up for the rest of the week. We have some more sessions on higher education, on livelihoods, on entrepreneurship. So please join us for the rest of the summit. I recognize a few names who were here for the 2 earlier sessions. Matthew, I'm calling you out. Thank you for being here for the 2 other sessions. Matthew from UNICEF. So I hope this is a really good lessons for all of you. Take these lessons with you as you move forward. So I will see you at the next session. This session is going to be recorded and will be on our YouTube channels. So thank you. Have a really lovely day, everyone. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Regeza.
Thank you. Bye.